There's a quiet revolution happening right now, not in the streets, not in the headlines, but in the invisible spaces between heartbeats, in the silence before thought, in the gentle knowing that whispers beneath your everyday awareness. Some people are living differently now. You might pass them in the grocery store, sit beside them on the subway, work alongside them in offices. They look ordinary. They navigate the same world you do, but something has fundamentally shifted in the way they experience reality. They've awakened to the fifth dimension, and here's what almost no one tells you: it's not what you think. You may have heard the term 5D consciousness thrown around in spiritual circles. Perhaps you've imagined it as some distant, unattainable state, a mystical realm reserved for monks on mountaintops, or enlightened beings who no longer need to deal with bills, relationships, or Monday mornings. But those who are actually living in 5D consciousness, they're doing something far more radical, far more subtle, and infinitely more grounded than the fantasy suggests. If you felt a pull toward this video, if something inside you stirred when you read the title, pause right now and type the words, "I am awakening." Not as a wish, not as a hope, but as a recognition of what's already stirring within you. And if this resonates with your soul's frequency, let the like button reflect that resonance. Because what we're about to explore together isn't theory. It isn't spiritual bypassing or feel-good platitudes. This is about the actual lived experience of those who have made the shift, and why everything you thought you knew about fifth dimensional living might be keeping you from recognizing that you're already on the threshold. The question isn't whether you're ready for 5D consciousness. The question is, are you ready to see that it's been calling you all along? To understand what fifth dimensional living truly means, we must first journey back, not just years or centuries, but to the very foundations of human consciousness itself. The ancients didn't call it 5D. They had other names for it. The Vedic seers spoke of Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, where the self recognizes its unity with all that is. The Buddhist masters called it Rigpa, pure awareness, untainted by the illusions of separation. The Christian mystics described it as unio mystica, the mystical union where the soul remembers it was never apart from the divine. In the Hermetic traditions of ancient Egypt and Greece, there was an understanding that reality exists in layers, in frequencies, in dimensions of perception. As above, so below, they taught, not as poetic metaphor, but as a precise description of how consciousness navigates multiple planes of existence simultaneously. The mystery schools understood something we're only now beginning to remember. Dimensions aren't places, they're states of awareness. Third-dimensional consciousness perceives a world of solid objects, linear time, separation, and survival. It's the realm where you are here and I am there. Where past is gone, future hasn't arrived, and all we have is this fragmented, isolated moment. It's not wrong. It's a particular frequency of perception, like seeing the world through a specific lens. Fourth-dimensional consciousness introduces the fluidity of time, the recognition of energetic patterns, the awareness that thoughts create reality. It's where synchronicity becomes normal, where you begin to sense the interconnection of all things. Many on the spiritual path have touched this realm, the realm of awakening psychic sensitivity, of energy work, of manifestation. But the fifth dimension, this is where everything you thought you knew about spiritual awakening dissolves into something far more integrated, far more paradoxical, and far more ordinary than you ever imagined. The ancient Taoists had a saying, before enlightenment chop wood, carry water, after enlightenment chop wood, carry water. This isn't a dismissal of transformation. It's the deepest secret of what transformation actually looks like. The Bhagavad Gita speaks of nishkama karma, action without attachment to outcome, where the doer and the deed merge into a seamless flow. The Zen masters called it mushin, no mind, where the separate self disappears and life simply lives itself through you. These weren't teaching spiritual escape. They were pointing to something revolutionary, the ability to be fully in the world, but not of it, to participate completely while remaining untouched, to engage with third-dimensional reality from a fifth-dimensional state of being. Why does this matter today in our modern world of technology, anxiety, and accelerated change? Because we're living in a time of collective awakening and collective crisis. The old structures of consciousness are crumbling. The systems built on separation, competition, and fear are revealing their unsustainability, and millions of souls, incarnated specifically for this moment, carrying within them the dormant codes of higher dimensional awareness. You are one of them. The pull you feel toward videos like this, toward spiritual wisdom, toward something more, that's not random curiosity. That's your soul remembering why you came here. That's the ancient knowledge encoded in your very cells, waiting for the moment when the frequencies of Earth would rise enough to activate what you've always known. Those living in 5D consciousness now, they're not special. They're not more evolved or spiritually superior. They've simply remembered how to tune their awareness to a frequency that was always available. And the way they actually live might surprise you. Here's the first thing that shatters the illusion. Those living in fifth-dimensional consciousness aren't floating above the chaos of ordinary life. They're standing right in the middle of it, cooking breakfast, paying taxes, experiencing heartbreak, navigating traffic. The difference isn't what they're doing, it's who is doing it. Imagine you're watching a movie. In third-dimensional consciousness, you're completely absorbed in the story. When the character suffers, you suffer. When they're threatened, your heart races. You've forgotten you're sitting in a theater. You've become identified with the drama unfolding on screen. In fifth-dimensional consciousness, you remember you're watching a movie while still fully engaged with the story. You feel the emotions. You care about the characters. You're moved by the narrative. But simultaneously, there's an awareness that knows this is a movie. I am not this character. I am the one watching. Except in 5D living, the movie is your life, and you are both the character and the eternal witness simultaneously. Those who have awakened to this state describe it as a kind of double awareness. They're fully present in their human experience, feeling their feelings, honoring their responsibilities, engaging authentically with others. But there's also a vast, quiet space of awareness that remains completely undisturbed by any of it. A woman loses her job. In 3D consciousness, this is a crisis. Identity crumbles, fear floods in, the mind spirals into stores of unworthiness and catastrophe. In 5D consciousness, she still feels the disappointment, still takes practical steps to find new work. But beneath it all, there's an unshakable knowing. I am not my job. This is an experience moving through me, not who I am. Something is unfolding that I cannot yet see. She grieves without becoming grief. She acts without being driven by fear. This is the first radical shift. Fifth dimensional beings have loosened their identification with the personal self, not abandoned it, loosened it, like wearing clothes without believing you are the clothes, like playing a role in a play without forgetting you're an actor. The spiritual teacher Ramana Maharshi once said, "The mind is like a mirror. It takes on the colors of whatever is reflected in it, but it is not those colors. Those living in 5 Psi D have remembered they are the mirror, not the reflection." But here's where it gets subtle, where most seekers get lost. They haven't transcended the ego by fighting it, by trying to become egoless or spiritually pure. They've simply stopped giving it the central role in their internal narrative. The ego still exists. It has preferences, opinions, memories, a sense of individuality. But it's no longer running the show. Think of it like this. In 3D, the ego is the CEO of your consciousness, making every decision based on survival, control, and protection. In 5D, the ego becomes more like a helpful assistant. It still manages appointments and remembers names, but the real decision maker is a deeper intelligence, a wisdom that flows from beyond the thinking mind. Those awakened to fifth dimensional living have made peace with their humanity. They don't pretend they're beyond human emotions or needs. They don't wear a spiritual mask of perpetual peace while suppressing their shadows. Instead, they've discovered something extraordinary. You can feel everything fully while being fundamentally okay. Anxiety can move through you without convincing you something is wrong. Anger can arise without needing to attack or defend. Sadness can wash over you without becoming a story about your unworthiness. Joy can bubble up without needing to cling to it or make it permanent. A man living in 5D consciousness sits with his dying mother. He weeps. His heart breaks open with the grief of losing someone he loves. But underneath the grief, there's a luminous awareness that knows birth and death are movements in consciousness. The essence of what she is cannot die. We are meeting in the eternal even as we say goodbye in time. His tears are real. His love is real. But he isn't shattered by the loss, because he no longer believes that physical form is the totality of existence. This is not detachment. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is the integration of the temporal and the eternal, the human and the divine, the wave and the ocean. The second profound shift is this. Those in 5D consciousness have moved from seeking to allowing. In lower dimensional states, there's a constant sense of incompleteness. The mind is always reaching toward the next thing, the next achievement, relationship, spiritual experience, or state of consciousness. There's an underlying belief that when I get there, then I'll finally be okay. But 5D beings have recognized a stunning truth. There is nowhere to get to. Everything is already here. Not as a mental concept, not as a belief system, but as a lived embodied reality. They've stopped waiting for life to begin. When they finally arrive, they've recognized that this breath, this moment, this utterly ordinary experience of being alive is already the sacred ground they were seeking. The spiritual journey doesn't end, but the seeking does. And in that ending, something vast opens up, a creativity, a spontaneity, a trust in the intelligence of life itself. Now we arrive at the part that challenges everything the spiritual marketplace has taught you about ascension, about rising above, about leaving the density of this world behind. Those truly living in fifth dimensional consciousness, they haven't ascended out of reality. They've descended deeper into it. Let me explain. There's a pervasive myth in spiritual communities that awakening means becoming less human, more detached, more ethereal, more above it all. That 5D living means you no longer struggle, no longer feel confused, no longer encounter darkness or difficulty, but the people who have genuinely shifted into this frequency will tell you something completely different. They feel more human than ever before, because fifth dimensional consciousness doesn't eliminate your humanity, it liberates it. In 3D, you're human, but you're also terrified of being human, terrified of your needs, your limitations, your vulnerability, your mortality. So you spend enormous amounts of energy trying to control, perfect, and transcend your humanness. You build walls, you create personas, you hide the parts of yourself that don't fit the image of who you think you should be. In 5D, the exhaustion of that resistance falls away. A man living in this state allows himself to be imperfect. He makes mistakes and doesn't spiral into shame. He has needs and doesn't apologize for them. He feels fear and doesn't interpret it as spiritual failure. He's messy, contradictory, evolving, and he's completely at peace with that. Because he's realized something the ego could never accept. Your worth isn't conditional on your performance. You don't have to earn your place in existence. You don't have to justify your being through achievement or spiritual attainment. You are valued by the universe simply because you are, not because of what you do, what you know, or what state of consciousness you've reached. This realization is earthquake level. It dismantles the entire structure of striving that the spiritual ego builds. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying so hard to be enlightened, enlightenment becomes your natural state. The third major shift in 5D consciousness is this, the collapse of duality, not as a philosophical concept, but as a lived experience. In third-dimensional awareness, life is divided into opposing forces, good and bad, light and dark, spiritual and material, sacred and mundane. You're constantly trying to move toward one pole and away from the other. You're trying to cultivate positive thoughts and eliminate negative ones. You're trying to be more light and transcend your shadow. But those living in fifth dimensional consciousness have discovered that reality doesn't actually work that way. Light and dark aren't enemies. They're dance partners. You cannot have expansion without contraction, joy without sorrow, birth without death. These aren't opposites to be reconciled. They're complementary aspects of a unified whole. A woman awakened to 5D doesn't exile her shadow. She doesn't pretend she's only love and light. She recognizes that her anger holds wisdom, that her grief carries medicine, that even her most uncomfortable emotions are intelligent responses to life. She's integrated what the psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow, not by destroying it, but by bringing it into conscious relationship, by recognizing that everything within her belongs. And in that integration, something miraculous happens. She stops creating enemies, both within herself and in the world. She sees the person who hurt her and recognizes their woundedness without excusing their behavior. She witnesses injustice and takes action without demonizing those who perpetuate it. She holds complexity without needing to flatten it into simple narratives of good versus evil. This doesn't mean she accepts harm. It doesn't mean she becomes passive or tolerant of abuse. But her responses come from clarity rather than reactivity, from power rather than fear, from wisdom rather than righteous rage. She's discovered that you can hold firm boundaries while still seeing the humanity in everyone. You can say no with absolute conviction while remaining open-hearted. You can stand for justice without making yourself superior to those you oppose. This is where 5D consciousness becomes deeply practical, deeply radical, because when you're no longer locked in the battle between opposing forces, when you're no longer trying to eliminate half of reality, an enormous amount of energy becomes available. Energy that was tied up in internal conflict, in resistance, in defending your position. And that energy, it naturally flows toward creation, toward service, toward love, but not the conditional love that says, I'll love you if you meet my needs, not the transactional love that keeps score, not the fearful love that clings and controls. The fourth revelation of 5D living is this: love stops being something you do and becomes what you are. Those operating from fifth dimensional consciousness don't love people because those people deserve it or because it makes them feel good. They love because their fundamental nature is love, the way the sun shines not because objects deserve light, but because shining is what the sun does. This doesn't mean they love everyone the same way, or that they don't have preferences, or that they allow everyone equal access to their time and energy. Boundaries aren't a lack of love. They're an expression of wisdom. But underneath all preferences, all boundaries, all the complex dynamics of relationship, there's an unchanging benevolence toward existence itself. A father watches his teenage daughter make a painful mistake. Every fiber of his being wants to intervene, to protect her from the consequences he can clearly see coming. In 3D consciousness, he might control or lecture or rescue, driven by his own anxiety about her suffering. In 5D consciousness, he feels that same love, that same protective instinct. But he also sees with crystal clarity that she needs this experience, that her soul chose this particular lesson, that his job isn't to prevent her pain, but to love her through it. So he allows, he witnesses, he remains available. And when she falls, he doesn't say, I told you so. He says, I'm here. What did you learn? His love has become wise, spacious, trusting of the intelligence moving through all things. This is how those in 5D live, in radical trust of life itself, not blind faith, not naive optimism, but a bone-deep recognition that there is an intelligence orchestrating reality that is far vaster than the limited perspective of the personal mind. They've stopped trying to control outcomes. They've surrendered the exhausting belief that they have to figure everything out, fix everything, manage every detail. And in that surrender, life begins to flow through them with an ease that looks like magic to those still struggling in 3D consciousness. But it's not magic, it's alignment. It's cooperation with what is, rather than resistance to it. So the question becomes, how do you actually live this? How do you move from understanding fifth dimensional consciousness intellectually to embodying it as your daily reality? Because here's the truth that no one wants to hear. You can't think your way into 5D. You can't meditate your way there. You can't manifest it or affirm it into existence. Fifth dimensional consciousness isn't something you achieve. It's something you recognize has always been here. But recognition requires practice, not the kind of practice that gets you somewhere, but the kind that reveals what's already present. The first practice is the practice of presence, not the performance of presence, not sitting in meditation with a peaceful face while your mind races with thoughts about dinner, but genuine presence, the radical act of being here fully, without the mind's constant escape into past regret or future anxiety. Start simple, impossibly simple. Right now, as you watch this video, can you feel your breath? Not control it, not deepen it, just notice it. The cool air entering your nostrils, the slight expansion of your chest, the natural pause between exhale and inhale. For just 3 breaths, be with that completely. Notice how the mind wants to wander, wants to comment, wants to evaluate whether you're doing it right. Notice how even this simple act reveals the mind's addiction to being anywhere but here. Those living in 5D have made this awareness a constant companion, not because they're disciplined or spiritually advanced, but because they've discovered that this moment is the only moment that actually exists. Past and future are mental constructs, memories and projections. The only reality you ever actually experience is now. And in this now, when you're fully present, there is no problem. Think about it. Right now, in this exact moment, without adding any mental story, is there a problem? Not the problem you were thinking about 5 minutes ago, not the one you'll face tomorrow, but right now, in the immediacy of this breath, this sensation, this moment of awareness, what's actually wrong? Usually the answer is nothing. This is the doorway. This is where 5th dimensional consciousness lives, in the spacious awareness of the eternal now. The second practice is the practice of witnessing. Throughout your day, cultivate the habit of noticing who is noticing. You're having a thought, but who is aware of the thought? You're feeling an emotion, but who is feeling the feeling? There's anger, sadness, joy moving through. But who is the space in which these movements occur? This isn't a mental exercise. This is a direct investigation into the nature of your being. A woman stuck in traffic feels frustration rising. In 3D, she becomes the frustration. Her body tenses. Her mind spins stories about how she's going to be late, how everyone else is an idiot, how nothing ever goes her way. In 5D, she notices there is frustration, not I am frustrated, but frustration is present. And in that subtle shift, a space opens. The frustration is still there, but she's not collapsed into it. She's the vast awareness in which frustration appears and eventually dissolves. Practice this throughout your day. There is anxiety. There is excitement. There is hunger. There is thought. You're training yourself to recognize that you are not the content of your experience. You are the context. You are not the weather. You are the sky in which all weather patterns arise and pass. The third practice is the practice of surrender. But surrender here doesn't mean giving up or becoming passive. It means releasing the white-knuckled grip of control and allowing life to move through you. Ask yourself regularly, what if I didn't need this moment to be different than it is? Not as resignation, not as defeat, but as a radical experiment in trust. You're in a difficult conversation. Every cell in your body wants to defend, explain, make the other person understand. What if you didn't? What if you simply listened, fully, without preparing your response? What if you allowed the discomfort of being misunderstood without needing to fix it immediately? You're facing an uncertain future. The mind wants to plan, control, figure it all out. What if you took the practical steps that are clearly yours to take and then released the outcome? What if you trusted that life knows where you're going even when you don't? Those in 5D haven't stopped taking action. They act decisively, sometimes boldly. But the action arises from intuitive knowing rather than fearful control. It flows naturally, effortlessly, the way a river flows downhill, not because it's trying to get somewhere, but because that's its nature. The fourth practice is the practice of integration. This might be the most important one, because this is where most seekers stumble. Your spiritual practice isn't separate from your ordinary life. The sacred isn't found only in meditation, in nature, in peak experiences. The sacred is here in the dishes, in the difficult email, in the messy conversation with your teenager. Stop compartmentalizing, stop dividing your life into spiritual time and regular time. When you're washing dishes, wash dishes. Feel the warm water on your hands. Notice the sensation of the sponge, the sound of the plates clicking together. Be fully present with this simple, mundane act. That is the practice. That is fifth dimensional living. A Zen master was once asked, "What is enlightenment?" He replied, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." The student was confused. "But doesn't everyone do that?" The master smiled. "No. When most people eat, they're thinking. When they sleep, they're worrying. They're never fully where they are." The master smiled. "No. When most people eat, they're thinking. When they sleep, they're worrying. They're never fully where they are." Fifth dimensional consciousness is eating when you eat, sleeping when you sleep, living when you live, fully, completely, without the mind's constant commentary and division. The fifth practice is the practice of self-compassion. You will forget. You will get triggered and collapse back into 3D reactivity. You will have days where presence feels impossible, where witnessing seems like a distant concept, where surrender feels like a cruel joke. And in those moments, the practice is to be kind to yourself, to recognize that awakening isn't a straight line. It's not about becoming perfect or maintaining some constant state of elevated consciousness. It's about returning again and again to presence, to awareness, to the recognition of what you are. Those living in 5D fall down just like everyone else. The difference is they don't make their falling down mean something about their worth. They don't spiral into, "I'm doing it wrong," or "I'll never get this." They simply notice, "Oh, I got lost in thought. I'm back now." And they return, without drama, without self-judgment. Treat yourself the way you would treat a beloved child learning to walk. When they fall, you don't berate them for not being better at walking. You encourage them. You celebrate their courage for trying. You help them stand up and take the next step. Do this for yourself. One final suggestion. Create a simple daily touchstone, not another rigid spiritual practice you'll feel guilty about missing, but a moment of conscious reconnection. Perhaps it's the first sip of morning coffee, where you pause and feel gratitude for this body, this breath, this inexplicable gift of being alive. Perhaps it's a single conscious breath before you start your car, where you remember, I am not going to work. Awareness is moving through this experience called going to work. Perhaps it's looking at the night sky for 30 seconds before bed, remembering the vast mystery you're part of. Find what resonates. Keep it simple. Do it consistently. These practices aren't about becoming someone else. They're about remembering who you've always been, beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the story of separation, beneath the forgetting that happened so you could experience yourself as human. You are the infinite, wearing a temporary disguise, and fifth dimensional living is simply the moment when the infinite remembers itself, while still enjoying the adventure of being beautifully, perfectly, gloriously human. So here we are at the end of this exploration and the beginning of something far more profound, your own direct experience, because everything shared here means nothing if it remains as concepts in your mind. Fifth dimensional consciousness isn't a philosophy to study. It's not a belief system to adopt. It's a living reality waiting to be recognized in the ordinary moments of your existence. Those who are already living in 5D, they're not special, they're not chosen. They simply stopped waiting for permission to remember what they've always known. They're the ones who chose presence over perfection, who chose awareness over achievement, who chose to be fully here, fully human, fully alive, even when it's messy, even when it's uncertain, even when the world around them still operates from fear and separation. And the most beautiful part? You don't have to leave your life to join them. You don't have to abandon your responsibilities, your relationships, your perfectly imperfect human experience. You simply have to stop abandoning yourself, stop fragmenting your awareness across 1,000 imaginary futures and remembered pasts. Stop treating this moment, this sacred, unrepeatable now, as something to get through on the way to somewhere else. The fifth dimension isn't a destination. It's a remembering, a coming home, a recognition that you were never separate from the vastness you've been seeking. Right now, as these words land in your awareness, can you feel it? That quiet knowing beneath the noise of thought, that spacious presence that's been witnessing your entire life without ever being touched by it? That is your true nature, not the story of who you think you are, but the awareness in which all stories appear. And when you live from there, even for a moment, even imperfectly, everything shifts, not because the world changes, but because you've remembered how to see it with new eyes, the eyes of your soul, the eyes that recognize the sacred in the ordinary, the eternal in the temporal, the divine in the devastatingly human. If this journey resonates with your awakening, if you feel the call to continue remembering, join this soul frequency by subscribing, not as another channel to consume, but as a companion on the pathless path home to yourself. The codes you carry within you are activating. The consciousness you came here to embody is ready. And those living in fifth dimensional awareness, they're not waiting for you to arrive. They're recognizing you've been here all along,